The crate slipped because Nora Whitcomb could no longer feel two of her fingers. She had hidden the swelling beneath a strip of flour sacking, winding it tightly around her left hand before dawn. The cloth concealed the purple marks where Hester's brass thimble had split the skin across her knuckles, but it could not restore her grip. Nora carried the crate from the storeroom with both arms pressed against its rough pine sides. 12 brown medicine bottles knocked softly together inside. Laudanum, camphor, tincture of arnica. Goods expensive enough that Hester had counted them twice when the freight wagon arrived. The trading post was crowded that morning. Snow had closed the eastern road, filling Blackridge Crossing with ranchers waiting on supplies, teamsters arguing over stalled freight, and families trying to buy flour before another storm reached the valley. Wet coats steamed beside the pot-bellied stove. Mud darkened the floorboards. Every conversation seemed louder than it needed to be. Nora moved carefully between customers, keeping her gaze below their shoulders. She had learned that people found it easier to ignore suffering when it did not look back at them. "Mind the shelf," Hester called from behind the counter. Nora adjusted the crate. Her numb fingers failed. One corner struck the edge of a barrel. The wood split with a dry crack, and the bottom dropped away. Bottles hit the floor. Glass burst beneath Nora's boots. Sharp medicinal fumes filled the room, bitter enough to sting her eyes. Amber liquid spread through the mud in glistening streams. Every voice in the trading post stopped. Nora stared at the ruin. Her first thought was not of the cost. It was that Hester had witnesses. "Nora?" Her stepmother spoke quietly. That was worse than shouting. Hester came around the counter in a black wool dress, fitted so tightly at the throat it seemed to hold her anger inside. Her silver hair was arranged in a smooth coil. Not one pin sat out of place. To strangers, she looked respectable enough to lead a church committee or sit beside a dying woman through the night. Nora knew how much cruelty could live beneath an orderly appearance. "I'm sorry," she said. "My hand slipped." Hester looked at the cloth wrapped around Nora's knuckles. "Your hand." Nora heard the accusation beneath the words. She bent to gather the larger pieces. "Leave it." Nora froze. Hester seized the back of her dress and hauled her upright. The collar tightened against Nora's throat. Someone near the stove shifted his boots. No one spoke. "You ruin a shipment worth more than most men earn in a month," Hester said. "And you think an apology will put the medicine back into the bottles? I can replace it from my wages." A few customers looked down. There had never been any wages. Hester kept a ledger in which every meal, candle, dress, and winter blanket became another debt charged against Nora's name. According to those pages, Nora owed nearly $300 for the privilege of working 14 hours a day in the trading post her father had helped build. Hester smiled without warmth. "Your wages." Her hand struck Nora's injured knuckles. Pain flashed up Nora's arm. She bit the inside of her cheek before a sound escaped. Hester noticed. She always noticed resistance, even when it was no more than swallowed breath. "You have cost me enough." She grabbed a fistful of Nora's hair and twisted until Nora's head was forced back. "Get on your knees." Nora did not move quickly enough. Hester dragged her down. Her knee landed among the glass. A shard cut through her stocking, but the pain barely registered beside the fire tearing across her scalp. Around them stood almost 20 people. Mr. Coulson, who had once told Nora that her father had been the fairest merchant in the territory, studied a sack of beans. Reverend Lowe rubbed his thumb over the brim of his hat. Sheriff Amos Pike leaned against the stove with a coffee cup in his hand. The tin star on his vest caught the lamplight each time he breathed. Delia Crane stood near the sewing notions, holding a bundle of gray thread. The older woman's face had gone pale. Delia had cleaned the cut above Nora's eyebrow last autumn. She had asked no questions then. She asked none now. Hester pulled harder. "You will account for every bottle," she said. "You will work until the debt is cleared, and you will thank me for not sending you to jail." Nora's eyes watered from the strain on her scalp. "I didn't steal anything." Hester's fingers tightened. "Did I say you did?" "No, ma'am." "But perhaps that guilty conscience is trying to confess." A murmur moved through the room. Nora understood what Hester was doing. By supper, the story would change. By Sunday, Nora would have smashed the medicine deliberately. By the following week, she would be a thief who had destroyed evidence when caught. Hester had built years of lies that way, one suggestion at a time, each repeated by someone who preferred gossip to courage. "I only dropped the crate," Nora whispered. Hester released her hair so abruptly that Nora nearly fell forward. Then she reached beneath the counter and drew out the leather tally strap. It was narrow, dark from years of handling, with a brass buckle at one end. Hester used it to secure account books during travel. She used it for other purposes when the doors were closed. Nora saw the buckle and forgot the people around her. The trading post vanished beneath an older memory. The storeroom after midnight, her cheek against the floor. Hester telling her that silence was the only useful thing she had inherited from her father. Hester folded the strap in half. "You will learn care," she said. Delia took half a step forward. Sheriff Pike lowered his cup. "Hester," he said, though his tone carried more weariness than warning. "Not in front of customers." The words struck Nora harder than the strap would have. Not stop. Not this is wrong. Only not here. Hester glanced at him. "She damaged my property." "I understand that." "She has been insolent for weeks." Pike looked at Nora kneeling among the glass. He had watched Hester file guardianship papers after Nora's father died, though Nora had already been 19. He had accepted Hester's claim that grief had left Nora confused and incapable of managing money. He had signed each paper placed before him without once asking Nora a question. Now he sighed as though her suffering were an inconvenience to his mourning. "Handle your household as you see fit," he said. "Just don't start a spectacle." Something changed inside Nora then. Not courage. Courage was too large a word for the small, cold emptiness opening beneath her ribs. It was simply the understanding that no help was coming. Hester raised the strap. The front door opened. Wind swept snow across the floor and sent the lamp flames bending in their chimneys. A man stood on the threshold. He was tall enough that the doorframe seemed built for someone smaller. Snow lay across the shoulders of his elk-hide coat and clung to the dark hair brushing his collar. A pale scar ran beneath his right eye, disappearing into several days of beard. A rifle rested in the crook of one arm, but his gloved hand remained far from the trigger. Behind him, a dun stallion waited at the hitching rail beneath a load of rolled hides and canvas-wrapped freight. The stranger looked first at the broken bottles, then at Nora, then at the strap in Hester's raised hand. He stepped inside and closed the door. The latch settled into place. No one introduced him. No one needed to. Nora had heard teamsters speak of Rafe Calder, the mountain guide who kept Copper Ridge Way Station beyond the North Pass. They said he could find a trail beneath fresh snow and smell a storm before the clouds rose. They also said he had once carried an injured freight driver 6 miles with a dislocated shoulder and had not spoken more than 10 words doing it. He looked harsher than the stories. Not angry. Anger moves too quickly. What Nora saw in his face was stillness, the kind that came before a decision rather than before an outburst. Hester lowered the strap by an inch. "We are conducting private business." Rafe's gaze remained on Nora. "Doesn't look private." His voice was low and rough from cold air. Sheriff Pike set his cup on the stove. "You're a long way from Copper Ridge, Calder." "Needed lamp oil." You have poor timing. Rafe looked at the glass surrounding Nora's knees. Seems exact enough. Hester's mouth tightened. This girl destroyed a crate of medicine. She is under my authority, and she will answer for it. Rafe shifted the rifle from one hand to the other, then leaned it against the wall beside the door. The deliberate movement made the room quieter. He had entered armed. He chose not to remain so. That true? He asked Nora. Her throat closed. No man had ever asked for her version while Hester was present. Even her father, near the end of his illness, had been too weak and fevered to understand what happened inside his own home. Hester answered for her. She admits she dropped it. Rafe did not look away from Nora. I asked her. Hester's face sharpened. Nora is not capable of explaining matters clearly. Nora knew the punishment waiting if she contradicted that statement. Hester would call her unstable. Pike would nod. Reverend Lowe would speak gently about obedience. By evening, the whole town would agree that Nora's own words proved she could not be trusted. Rafe waited. He did not encourage her. He did not soften his face. He simply left the silence open. The crate slipped, Nora said. Her voice sounded too thin for the crowded room. Rafe glanced at her wrapped hand. Why? Nora hid it against her skirt. Hester stepped between them. That is enough. Buy your oil or leave. Rafe's eyes moved to the strap. How did she hurt her hand? She is careless. Did carelessness leave finger marks on her neck? Nora stopped breathing. Hester had fastened her collar high that morning. She had believed the bruising hidden. Rafe had seen it from the door. Sheriff Pike pushed away from the stove. You need to mind yourself, Calder. This woman runs a lawful business. Rafe turned his head slightly. And you? I uphold the law. Then uphold it. A flush crept above Pike's collar. No complaint has been made. Rafe looked back at Nora. There was no pity in his expression. Pity would have asked her to endure being observed. His attention felt different, exact, uncomfortable, as though he believed the answer mattered more than anyone's reputation. Have you made one? He asked. Nora's lips parted. Hester laughed. The sound was brittle. She owes me food, lodging, clothing, and the cost of every mistake she has made since childhood. If she has complaints, she may voice them after she settles her account. She's 23, Rafe said. She is my stepdaughter. Not my question. Hester's eyes flashed. She cannot leave. The words came too quickly. A different silence followed. Rafe studied her. Why? Hester recovered almost at once. Because she has stolen from me? Nora looked up. What? Hester turned on her. $312 are missing from the freight account. That isn't true. You had access to the books. I keep the books because you order me to. And now the money is gone. Nora stared at her stepmother. The amount was not random. She had found the discrepancy 2 weeks earlier, a chain of false freight fees transferred into an account marked only with Pike's initials. Before she could copy the entries, Hester had taken the ledger and beaten her for reading pages beyond the daily totals. Now Hester intended to place the theft on her. Sheriff Pike rested his hand near his holster. If there's missing money, Nora will remain in town until I investigate. Rafe's attention moved to him. Got a warrant? Don't require one to prevent flight. Got a formal charge? Pike's jaw hardened. I have the statement of a respected merchant. You have an accusation made after a witness walked through the door. Hester stepped toward Nora and seized her arm. She belongs in my house until this is resolved. Rafe moved. Nora saw only the change in distance. One moment he stood near the door, the next his hand was around Hester's wrist, not crushing, not twisting, simply stopping it. Hester went rigid. Rafe's voice remained level. Let go. How dare you touch me? Let go of her. Sheriff Pike drew his revolver halfway from its holster. Rafe noticed. His expression did not change. The rifle remained against the wall beyond his reach. That seemed to unsettle Pike more than a threat might have. Delia Crane spoke. Hester? Everyone turned toward her. The bundle of thread trembled in Delia's hands. She swallowed once. I treated Nora's ribs in November. Hester stared at her. Delia continued before fear could silence her again. 2 were cracked. She told me she fell from the loft, but there was bruising around both wrists, the kind left when someone holds a person down. Nora felt the floor tilt beneath her. Delia's eyes filled, though her voice grew steadier. I saw burns on her shoulder last spring, and the cut above her eye. I should have spoken then. You senile old liar, Hester said. No. Delia looked at Nora. Only a coward. There is a difference, though it may not matter to the one I failed. Rafe released Hester's wrist once her hand dropped from Nora's arm. He stepped back. The distance he created was deliberate. He was not taking Nora from one grip only to place her in another. Movement flickered near the rear shelves. Eli Mercer, the stable boy, slipped between 2 flour barrels. His cap sat crooked over one ear, and fear had drained the color from his freckled face. He crouched beside Nora as though collecting broken glass. Something touched her palm. A folded page. Your pa hid it under the old grain bin, Eli whispered. I found it when Mrs. Whitcomb told me to tear the bin apart. Hester heard him. What did you give her? Eli sprang away. Nora closed her fingers around the paper. Hester lunged. Rafe placed himself between them. He did not touch her this time. He did not need to. Sheriff, Hester snapped. Arrest that boy. Arrest Nora. Arrest this man. Pike looked around the room. Too many people were watching now, not looking at the floor. Watching. His hand remained on his revolver, but he had lost the certainty of a man protected by universal silence. Rafe turned toward Nora. She knelt among broken medicine bottles with blood warming the fabric over her knee, a hidden paper in one hand and 23 years of obedience pressing down on her shoulders. He crouched, bringing his face closer to her level. He did not extend a hand. He did not tell her to stand. He asked, Do you want out? Nora stared at him. Outside, wind scraped dry snow along the windows. Inside, no one moved. Hester found her voice first. She doesn't understand what you're asking. Rafe ignored her. Nora. Hearing her name without contempt nearly undid her. You don't know me, she whispered. No. You don't know what she says I owe. No. You don't know whether I stole anything. His eyes rested on the folded page in her hand, then returned to her face. No. Then why would you help me? A shadow crossed his expression. Because wanting out should be enough. The answer entered the place inside her where fear had lived so long it felt like bone. Nora looked at the front door. Beyond it waited winter, a mountain road, and a man she had never spoken to before today. There was no promise of comfort, no guarantee that Copper Ridge was safer than Blackridge Crossing. Then she looked at Hester. Her stepmother stood rigid beside the ruined medicine, the leather strap still clenched in one hand. Sheriff Pike watched Nora as though measuring how much force it would take to keep her compliant. Reverend Lowe said nothing. Mr. Colson said nothing. Delia had spoken, but years too late. Rafe remained crouched and empty-handed. He was waiting for an answer, not surrender. Nora pressed the folded page against her palm and forced air into her lungs. Yes, she said. The The word was almost soundless. Hester smiled in triumph. See? She cannot even speak clearly. Rafe did not rise. He kept his eyes on Nora. Say it so they hear you. Terror surged through her. Her body remembered every punishment that had followed defiance. Her scalp burned where Hester had pulled her hair. Blood from her knee seeped slowly into her stocking. Nora placed one hand on the floor and pushed herself upright. Her legs shook. No one helped her. That mattered. She reached standing on her own. Then she faced her stepmother, the sheriff, and every person who had trained themselves not to see her. Yes, Nora said again, louder this time. I want out. For one suspended second, the room held her answer as if it were dangerous. Hester recovered first. No. She stepped around Rafe and reached for Nora's arm. Nora caught the counter and moved back one pace. Hester's fingers closed on empty air. A faint sound passed through the trading post, the recognition that Nora had refused her. You ungrateful fool. Rafe rose but did not place himself in front of Nora. He stood beside her, leaving the doorway visible. Sheriff Pike drew his revolver. Several customers retreated toward the walls. Delia remained where she was. Calder, step away, Pike ordered. Why? So I can detain a suspected thief. On what evidence? Hester's statement. She made an accusation after I walked in. Got a written complaint? Pike's face reddened. I don't need a trapper teaching me the law. Hester pointed at Nora's closed fist. She stole papers from my business. Search her. Pike extended his free hand. What are you holding? The folded page seems to burn in Nora's palm. Rafe looked at her, not at the sheriff. Your choice. Pike raised the revolver toward him. I will not be defied in my own town. Rafe did not move. His rifle still leaned against the wall beyond his reach. You point that at me? He said. Decide whether you mean to fire. The barrel wavered. Nora looked around the room. Reverend Lowe stared at the floor. Two armed teamsters watched without speaking. Delia's frightened eyes stayed fixed on Nora. Nora opened her hand. The page was yellowed and folded into eighths. Her father's handwriting showed through the worn paper. Hester lunged. Give me that! Rafe shifted into her path. Read it, he told Nora. Her hands shook as she unfolded the sheet. At the top, her father had written, Whitcomb Freight Reserve, Private Reconciliation. Below it ran 4 months of entries, freight payments, supplier costs, deposits, then repeated withdrawals marked A.P. Amos Pike. At the bottom was a note dated 11 days before her father's fever took his speech. If found after my death, compare these figures with the county transport book. Hester has altered the store copies. Amos Pike signed receipts for loads that never arrived. Nora owns 1/2 interest under the partnership articles held in the blue deed box. Nora read the note aloud. Her voice trembled at first. By the final sentence, it did not. Pike's face had gone gray. A forgery, Hester said. Eli spoke from behind the flour barrels. It was in Mr. Whitcomb's hiding place. You planted it. I can't write like that. Someone paid you. With what? You owe me 6 weeks. One teamster gave a startled laugh. Pike lowered the revolver but kept it in hand. That page proves nothing. A P could mean anyone. It lists your receipt numbers, Nora said. His eyes sharpened. She knew then that the numbers were real. He had not asked which ones. Hester saw the mistake. Nora has always been confused by accounts. Her father kept her away from business. That's a lie. The words escaped before fear could stop them. Hester's stare carried the old command. Lower your eyes, apologize, be silent. Nora almost obeyed. Then she looked toward the door. My father taught me double-entry bookkeeping when I was 13, she said. I balanced freight invoices before you came to Blackridge. He left you nothing. The partnership articles say otherwise. They do not exist. Then open the blue deed box. For an instant, Hester's expression changed. Delia set down her thread. Open it. Mr. Coulson cleared his throat. If Nora has an ownership claim, it should be examined. The woman, Delia corrected. His cheeks colored. The woman. Hester looked around at the customers. Every one of you has bought on credit from me. Remember that before joining a hysterical girl and a wilderness brute. The room quieted. She knew where fear lived in each person. Rafe turned to Nora. What do you need to leave? The question struck with practical force. Nora looked toward the staircase. 2 dresses, her mother's comb, patched stockings. Nothing worth crossing Hester's reach. My coat? Hester laughed. My coat, my boots, my roof. She leaves with what she owns. The green shawl belonged to my mother, Nora said. You cannot prove that. Delia took the shawl from a peg near the rear door. I can. I helped Clara Whitcomb hem it. She carried it forward. Hester blocked her. Delia stopped, trembling but upright. Move. Hester did not. Rafe took 1 step. Hester moved. Delia wrapped the shawl around Nora's shoulders, careful of her bruised neck. I am sorry, she whispered. Nora wanted to ask why cracked ribs had not been enough, but she had no room inside herself for Delia's forgiveness. Tell the truth when Pike asks you to change it. I will. Nora tucked the page inside her bodice. Pike lifted the gun again. That remains evidence. Then make a copy. You will surrender it. No. I can arrest you for obstruction. Under which statute? Pike stared. Nora had copied county notices for years. A complaint had to be written, entered in the county book, and identify the stolen property. A traveler could be held without warrant only after a witnessed felony. No one had witnessed theft, only Hester's violence. The complaint must be filed, Nora said. You have no charge and no warrant. You think a few lines of law make you untouchable? No. She glanced at the witnesses. I think they make you careful. The teamster who had laughed folded his arms. I saw no theft. Neither did I, his companion said. Mr. Coulson added, Nor I. The declarations came years too late to be brave, but they came. Pike understood that any violence now would not become a private account written in his own hand. He shoved the revolver into its holster. This is not finished. No, Nora said. It isn't. Hester's face went still. You crossed that threshold, and you never returned to this house. Nora looked at the staircase. For years she had imagined escape as a secret flight before dawn, always with Hester's voice chasing her. There would be no secrecy now. I won't return. Hester's composure broke. She seized Nora by the hair and dragged her backward, lifting the leather strap with her other hand. Rafe caught the strap before it fell and tore it from Hester's grip. But Nora did not wait for him to free her. She drove her elbow backward. It struck Hester's ribs. Her grip loosened. Nora tore away and stumbled against the counter. Hester stared as though refusal were unnatural. Nora bent, picked up the strap, and laid it across the open ledger. You may enter that under losses. Then she walked to the door. Rafe moved aside. He did not open it for her. Nora lifted the latch herself. Wind shoved snow across the floor. Cold seized her lungs as she stepped onto the boardwalk. But the street looked wider than it ever had before. Rafe followed and closed the door behind him. For several seconds, Nora stood breathing hard. She had no food, no money, no proper boots, and no certainty of where she would sleep. Yet the closed door frightened her less than anything behind it. Rafe went to the dun stallion tied at the rail. His name is Bracken. Nora looked at the freight lashed behind the saddle. You came for lamp oil. And salt. You did not plan to take anyone north? No. She trusted the blunt answer more than reassurance. Rafe removed a folded red blanket from his pack and stopped beyond arm's reach. May I? It took Nora a moment to understand. Yes. He settled it around her without touching her neck. You're bleeding. She glanced at her knee. It's shallow. Still needs cleaning. Where are we going? Livery first, then north, if that is still what you want. To Copper Ridge? Until the pass opens. And after? You decide. What would you expect from me? While you heal? Nothing. No one gives food and shelter for nothing. I do today. And tomorrow? His expression hardened, though not at her. Tomorrow I offer written terms. You read them before agreeing. Written? You keep books? Yes. Then you'll know if I cheat. A breath escaped her that was almost a laugh. The trading post door flew open. Hester stood on the threshold without her cloak. Nora! The command cracked across the street. Nora's muscles tightened. Rafe did nothing. He did not touch her or step between them. Hester descended one step. You come back inside. Fear rose as faithfully as ever, but now it met open road and a choice already spoken. Nora turned her back on Hester. She walked beside Rafe toward the livery, while Hester shouted that she was a thief, a liar, and a burden no decent household would keep. Nora heard every word. She kept walking. At the corner, Eli ran from an alley carrying a canvas satchel. Inside were stockings, bread, her mother's comb, and the blue arithmetic book her father had used to teach her. I took them before she locked your room. You could lose your job. Eli looked back toward the store. Seems I quit. Rafe studied him. Mercer's freight crew leaves for Helena in spring. Tell Samuel Reed you can read manifests. Eli's eyes widened. That a job? If you show up on time. Nora touched the boy's sleeve. Keep away from Hester. If Pike asks about the page, tell the truth. I will. At the livery, Rafe traded 2 fox pelts for lined boots, wool trousers, and a heavy coat that had belonged to the owner's sister. He did not call the purchases a debt. When the stable owner handed over the change, Rafe pointed to Nora. Hers. 3 silver dollars landed in her palm. She'd never carried more than pennies. Rafe turned away to check Bracken's cinch, granting her privacy with the money as though it were ordinary. Nora changed behind a stall partition, washed the cut on her knee, and packed her ruined dress into the satchel. When she emerged, a patient gray mare stood saddled beside Bracken. I can't ride well, she said. She can. Did you buy her? Rented her to the North Trail. With what? Beaver. Nora waited. Rafe met her eyes. You are not the cost. The answer struck deep enough that she had to look away. He helped her mount only after asking. Then he swung onto Bracken and turned toward the northern road. At the far end of the street, Hester stood beside Pike. They watched Nora leave with their heads bent close together. Nora touched the page hidden beneath her coat. Walking out had not ended anything. Hester still possessed the store and its ledgers. Pike still wore the star. Nora had 1 page, $3, and her own word. For the first time, that felt like a beginning. She gathered the mare's reins. Rafe waited until Nora moved first. Together, they rode north as Blackridge Crossing disappeared behind the snow. The road narrowed within an hour. Blackridge Crossing lay behind a curtain of snow, and with it, the last chimney smoke, wagon ruts, and church bell Nora had ever known. Ahead, the northern trail climbed between dark stands of fir, its packed surface disappearing beneath wind-blown powder. Rafe rode several lengths in front of her. He did not crowd the gray mare or keep glancing back as though expecting Nora to fail. At every fork, he slowed long enough to point out the safer line. Stay left of the black rock. Loose shale beneath that drift. Let her choose her footing on the ice. Nora followed because the mare did. The animal moved with patient intelligence, testing each step before committing her weight. Nora's thighs began to ache, then burn. By midday, the pain in her injured knee had become a steady pulse. She said nothing. Rafe stopped beneath a leaning pine. He looked at the way she held herself. What hurts? Nothing that matters. That wasn't my question. Nora tightened her grip on the reins. My knee. From the glass? Yes. Why didn't you say? The answer seemed obvious. Complaints created anger. Weakness created cost. I can continue. I know. He dismounted and tied Bracken to a low branch. Then he waited beside Nora's mare. May I help you down? The question embarrassed her more than an order would have. She nodded. Rafe placed his hands at her waist only after she leaned toward him. He lifted her down carefully, setting her on the packed snow before stepping away. No lingering touch, no assumption that permission for one movement belonged to the next. He spread a square of canvas beneath the tree and pointed to it. Sit. Nora obeyed, then almost apologized for obeying too slowly. Rafe knelt several feet away and opened his medical roll. I need to see the cut. She gathered the wool trouser leg to her knee. The stocking beneath was stiff with dried blood. His mouth flattened. This will sting. He poured a little boiled water from his canteen over the wound. The cold had numbed her skin, but the cleaning brought the pain alive. Nora gripped the edge of the canvas. Rafe watched her face. Want me to stop? She shook her head. He removed a narrow piece of glass with tweezers, washed the cut again, and bound it with clean cloth. His fingers were steady despite the stiffness in his left shoulder. Nora noticed the way he avoided lifting that arm above his chest. You're hurt too. Old injury. Does it trouble you? Sometimes. He closed the medical roll. That doesn't answer very much, she said. No. A flicker passed through his eyes. Not offense, perhaps surprise that she had challenged him. He handed her bread and dried venison. You'll need strength before the ridge. Nora looked at the food. Will you record this against me? No. The clothes? The mare? No. Then how do you keep your accounts? Accurately. She almost smiled. Rafe sat against the opposite side of the tree and ate without conversation. The space between them remained open. Nora found herself watching his hands. Broad, scarred, capable of violence. Yet every time they approached her, they stopped first. When they mounted again, the wind had shifted west. Rafe looked toward the peaks. We won't reach the station before dark. Is there shelter? An old survey cabin near Split Pine. And if the storm reaches us first? We make shelter. There was no boast in the answer. The trail rose harder in the afternoon. Snow deepened around the horses' fetlocks. The gray mare began to breathe heavily, and Nora leaned forward to ease the pull on the saddle. Clouds erased the upper slopes. Rafe dismounted and led Bracken. Nora tried to do the same, but the moment her boots touched the ground, pain shot through her knee. Ride, he said. I can walk. You can worsen the cut, too. You're walking. My leg works. She bristled. I am not helpless. Rafe looked at her across the mare's neck. Didn't say you were. You decided for me. I judged the trail. That is still a decision. The wind tugged loose strands of hair across her face. She expected impatience. Instead, Rafe considered the objection. You're right. The admission left her unprepared. He pointed uphill. Choice is yours. If you walk, we go slower and may miss the shelter. If you ride, we save time and protect the knee. I recommend riding. Nora looked at the darkening sky. I'll ride. Rafe nodded once and continued. No punishment followed the disagreement. She carried that fact with her for the next mile. They reached Split Pine as dusk closed in, but the survey cabin had partially collapsed beneath the weight of snow. One wall remained standing. The roof sagged low enough to touch the drifts. Rafe circled the ruin. Can we stay? Nora asked. Not inside. He pointed to a shallow depression beneath a granite shelf 20 yards away. We used the wall as a windbreak and the rock for cover. They worked together. Rafe cut branches while Nora cleared loose snow with a flat board from his pack. Her knee protested, but the work steadied her. It had a beginning and an end. No one changed the standard halfway through to ensure failure. Rafe stretched canvas from the granite shelf to the surviving wall, forming a sloped shelter. He built a low fire where smoke could escape and settled the horses behind the stone. Nora unpacked the food without asking. You know how much we can spare? Rafe asked. She examined the sacks. Enough beans for 4 meals if we use half a cup each, bacon for 3, flour for 6 bannocks, perhaps 7 if we make them thin. You counted at the livery? I counted when Eli packed the satchel. Rafe gave her a small iron pot. You cook? I can. Because you want to? The question stopped her. Yes? They ate bean broth with pieces of bread softened in it. Rafe took the smaller portion. Nora noticed and divided the last strip of bacon between their cups before he could object. The storm reached them after nightfall. Wind struck the canvas in hard bursts. Snow hissed along the granite. The horses shifted but did not panic. Rafe placed his bedroll beneath the deepest part of the shelter and spread a second blanket near the fire. That one is yours. Where will you sleep? By the opening. Nora stared at the narrow arrangement. There's room in the bedroll. Rafe's hands paused on the blanket. Her stomach tightened. She had meant only that the cold was worsening, yet the words seemed to open a door she did not understand. He looked at her carefully. Do you want me there? She could not answer. That was answer enough. No, he said. You take it. I didn't mean... You don't have to explain. But you'll freeze. I won't. You cannot sleep sitting upright all night. I've done worse. Nora looks toward the dark outside. You helped me leave. You bought clothes. You rented a horse. I have $3 and no way to repay any of it. Rafe sat on a flat stone beside the fire. We should settle that now. The calmness in his voice made her fear sharpen. He drew a small notebook from inside his coat, tore out a page, and placed it on his knee. Copper Ridge is a way station, not a household. Freight drivers pay for meals, stall space, repairs, and beds when there are beds. I keep accounts poorly. Nora said nothing. I can offer you a room until the North Pass opens. No charge. There must be a condition. There are several. Her body went rigid. Rafe held the pencil but did not write. You get a key. I don't enter without permission unless there is fire or immediate danger. You decide whether you work. If you do, I pay wages. If you don't, you still eat. Nora searched his face. He continued. I don't touch you without asking. You don't owe me for what happened in town. You don't owe me for this journey. When the pass opens, I will take you to the territorial road or give you enough fare to go where you choose. Why? Because leaving Hester only matters if you remain free afterward. The fire cracked between them. Nora looked down at her bandaged hand. And if I choose to stay at Copper Ridge? Then we write new terms. As what? Whatever work you want. Bookkeeper, station manager, cook, partner, if you invest someday. Nothing gets decided tonight. She swallowed. What do you get? For now, accurate books would help. That is not enough to justify all this. Rafe's gaze moved to the canvas opening where snow spun beyond the firelight. My brother needed help once. I decided he could wait until morning. The words emerged without expression, but his right hand closed around the pencil. There was an avalanche before dawn. Nora waited. He was 26. I found him 2 days later. The wind pressed the canvas inward and released it. I have spent 9 years knowing the price of deciding someone else can endure one more night. Nora understood then that his help was not charity untouched by pain. It came from a wound he could not undo. That wasn't me, she said. No. Saving me won't change what happened? No. Then don't turn me into his punishment. Rafe looked at her. The words frightened Nora after she spoke them. She had no right to challenge a man offering shelter. But he lowered the pencil. You're right again. A bitter edge entered his voice. I may get tired of that. This time she did smile. It was small and unfamiliar, but real. Rafe wrote the terms in plain language. He left space beneath them. Add what I missed. Nora took the pencil. Her fingers trembled less than they had that morning. She added, Nora Whitcomb may leave at any time without debt. Her personal papers and wages remain solely hers. Any work assigned must be agreed upon in advance. Rafe read the additions. Fair. You didn't object. They're your conditions. He signed first. Rafe Calder. Nora studied the page before adding her own name. No guardian, no witness deciding whether her mind was sound, no stepmother turning food into chains. Nora Whitcomb. Rafe folded the agreement and handed it to her. Keep it. What prevents you from denying it later? Nothing but my word. That is not a strong system. No. You need duplicate records. I told you I keep poor books. She placed the agreement inside the arithmetic book. I'll make a copy at the station. If you decide to work. Nora looked at him over the fire. If the books are as poor as you claim, I may have no choice. You always have one. The storm continued through the night. Nora lay inside the bedroll with her satchel beneath her head and the arithmetic book pressed against her ribs. Rafe sat near the opening, rifle across his knees, his outlines steady whenever lightning whitened the snow clouds. She slept in fragments, waking whenever the wind struck hard. Each time, Rafe remained where he had said he would be. Dawn showed what the storm had changed. The wind had scoured the open slope above Split Pine down to blue ice, then piled the stolen snow across the trail in steep white shelves. Rafe stood beyond the shelter with one glove pressed to the ground, studying the fractures running through the nearest drift. Nora came out fastening her coat. Can we cross? We can try before the sun warms it. That does not sound encouraging. It isn't. He rolled the bedding, divided the remaining supplies between the horses, and shortened every lash. When Nora reached for the flour sack, he handed it to her without comment. She tested its weight. This was on Bracken yesterday. Yes. So were the salt and the lamp oil. Rafe glanced up. His load is too heavy on the left. It rode level. Before we used food from the right pannier. He checked the packs again. The left side hung lower by less than an inch. Nora shifted the flour and one coil of rope to the mare. Rafe tightened the cinch. You notice freight quickly. I spent 10 years watching men blame broken bottles on drivers when the real fault was a clerk balancing a load by price instead of weight. They left the ruined cabin at first light. For the first mile, the trail held. Then the trees thinned, exposing a narrow traverse beneath a corniced ridge. The slope above them appeared smooth, but Rafe stopped where a faint line ran across the snow like a seam in cloth. "Stay here." He moved forward on foot, probing with a long pole. Nora watched the surface around his boots. Her father had taught her to read columns for what was absent as much as for what was present. The snow had its own accounting. Wind marks crossed most of the slope, but a broad patch above Rafe was blank, newly deposited, unsupported. "Rafe?" He turned. The slope broke. Snow dropped with a muffled crack. Not an avalanche large enough to bury the mountain, but enough to sweep a man and 2 horses from the trail. "Back!" Rafe shouted. Nora pulled the mare toward the trees. Bracken wheeled, but the shifted pack struck the rock wall. The stallion lost his footing and slid to his knees. Rafe grabbed the bridle with his right hand. His left shoulder hit the stone. His face tightened. The first wave of loose snow struck his legs. Nora saw the rope coil tied behind her saddle. She did not wait for instruction. She freed it, looped one end around the trunk of a fir, and made the freight hitch her father had used to secure rolling barrels. The other end she threw toward Rafe. He caught it with his good hand. "Through Bracken's breast strap," she called. "Not the saddle." He obeyed. Nora took the slack around the tree and leaned her weight backward. The mare braced beside her. Rafe hauled on the rope as snow poured past his boots. Bracken found one hoofhold, then another. The slide ended as suddenly as it began. For several breaths, no one moved. Rafe stood against the stallion's neck, his left arm hanging low. Nora tied off the rope and went to him. "Your shoulder, still attached. That was not my question." His mouth shifted as if he recognized his own words returned to him. "Pulled, not broken." "Can you ride?" "Yes." "Can you saddle a horse with one arm?" A pause. "No." Nora looked at the ridge. "Then tell me how." He did. They moved the freight off Bracken, checked his legs, and rebuilt both loads on safer ground. Rafe explained each knot once. Nora made him inspect none of them until she finished. "All sound," he said. "You expected otherwise?" "I expected to correct one." "Which?" "The knot you tied around the flower." She looked. He pointed with his right hand. "You made it better than mine." They crossed the exposed slope with the rope linking both horses to the first, one section at a time. Nora walked despite her knee, choosing each step. Rafe did not object. By noon, they had descended into a timbered basin, where the wind weakened and the snow settled into deep, quiet drifts. Copper Ridge Way Station appeared near dusk. The main building stood at the bend of a frozen creek, built of squared logs around a stone chimney. A stable and freight shed formed 2 sides of a rough yard. Beyond them rose a signal mast with an empty iron bracket where a lantern should have hung. The place was larger than Nora expected. It was also losing a battle against neglect. One stable door sagged from its upper hinge. Split firewood leaned uncovered beneath the eaves. 3 empty oil barrels lay beside the shed, though Rafe had risked the storm to purchase more. Snow had drifted against the kitchen vent. The roof gutter feeding the water cistern had separated at one joint. Rafe watched her examining it. "You haven't crossed the yard." "I can see from here." "That bad?" "Do you want honesty?" "That was in the agreement." "The station is one hard storm away from becoming an expensive ruin." He considered the buildings. "Useful having you here already." The words carried no claim, only recognition. Rafe led the horses into the stable. Nora unsaddled the mare under his direction while he worked one-handed beside Bracken. When she reached for the heavier pannier, he stopped her. "Knee. Shoulder." They looked at each other. "We live together," Nora said. They did. Inside the main station, the air smelled of cold ashes, leather, and old coffee. A long common room held 2 tables, a stove, and 6 bunks built against the wall for travelers. A counter separated the kitchen from the rest. Behind it stood shelves crowded without order, beans beside horseshoe nails, candles behind dried apples, invoices tucked beneath a cracked mixing bowl. Rafe lit the stove. Nora stood with her satchel held against her chest. He noticed. "Your room is through there." A short passage led to 2 doors. Rafe opened the first and remained in the hallway. The room contained a narrow bed, a washstand, a small window, and a wooden chest. It was plain, but the door was solid. Rafe placed a brass key on the washstand. "Only copy." Nora stared at it. "You have no other key?" "No." "What if I lose it?" "We replaced the lock." He did not step across the threshold. "The room has been empty since the station opened. Bedding is clean, window sticks in damp weather. If you want different furniture, tell me." Nora picked up the key. It weighed almost nothing. Still, her hand closed around it with care. "Thank you." Rafe nodded toward the common room. "I'll be at the stove. Door stays open or closed as you choose." She closed it. The latch clicked softly. No one turned a key from the other side. Nora stood alone until the silence stopped feeling like a test. Then she placed her mother's comb in the washstand drawer, laid the arithmetic book inside the chest, and slipped the hidden ledger page beneath its lining. When she returned, Rafe had removed his coat and was trying to bind his shoulder with a strip of cloth using his teeth. "You will make it worse." "Likely." "Sit down." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that an order?" "A professional recommendation." "What profession?" "Daughter of a man who dislocated the same shoulder twice." Rafe sat. Nora stopped beside him. "May I?" "Yes." She eased his shirt away from the joint. Old scar tissue crossed the back of his shoulder, pale against weather-darkened skin. The new swelling was already visible. "This healed badly." "I was alone." "That is becoming a poor excuse." She wrapped the joint firmly against his chest. Rafe did not make a sound, but sweat formed near his temple. "You should not lift with this for several days. Freight comes when the pass opens." "The pass will not open tomorrow." As if answering her, a deep roar moved across the valley. They both turned toward the windows. Snow thundered somewhere beyond the southern ridge. The sound continued for nearly half a minute before fading. Rafe rose and went outside. He returned 10 minutes later with snow on his hair. "The lower trail is buried." "For how long?" 2 weeks if weather holds. Longer if it doesn't." Nora looked around the common room. The written agreement had promised shelter until the pass opened. The mountain had just extended its term. Rafe went to the kitchen shelves and took down a ledger bound in cracked brown leather. "This is what I have." Nora opened it. 3 pages contained dates. 2 contained names. Expenses appeared wherever Rafe had found space, sometimes in dollars, sometimes in quantities of pelts. Several payments were marked with an X. Half the winter supply entries were missing. She looked up slowly. "You called this poor bookkeeping." "I was being generous." Nora turned another page. Invoices from Blackridge Trading Post had been folded into the binding. Lamp oil charged at nearly twice the rate Nora remembered. Salt listed in 4 sacks, though she saw only 1 unopened sack in the pantry. A freight surcharge appeared under Amos Pike's authorization number. Her exhaustion receded. "Do you have every invoice?" "Those I didn't use to start fires." She stared at him. "That was a joke." "I am relieved you recognize the concept." Rafe leaned his good shoulder against the counter. "You don't have to work tonight." "I know." The answer came easily enough to surprise her. She carried the ledger to the table, removed the 3 silver dollars from her pocket, and placed them beside it. "What are those for?" "Nothing. I wanted to know whether I could put them down without someone taking them." Rafe looked at the coins, then at her. "You can?" Nora opened her father's arithmetic book to a blank page. "If I work, I set the method." Agreed. I need every receipt, contract, tally board, and freight marker. I also need an inventory made by count, not guess. Agreed. My wage is $1 a week until I know how much labor this requires. 2. 1 and meals. 2 and meals. That is excessive. So is saving a loaded horse on a ridge. That was not bookkeeping. It protected station property. Nora considered the argument. $1.50. Rafe extended his right hand, then stopped before reaching across the table. Nora looked at it. This time she placed her hand in his. Agreed, he said. His grip was warm and brief. She released him first. Rafe brought a small iron ring from a peg behind the counter. 4 keys hung from it. Kitchen, pantry,
Freight shed. Stable. He set them beside the ledger.
Nora touched the brass key in her pocket, then the iron keys before her. The first secured a room that belonged only to her. The others opened work she had chosen. Outside, snow sealed the southern trail. Inside, Nora drew a clean line across the page and wrote the first honest entry Copper Ridge had seen in years. For 12 days, Nora rebuilt Copper Ridge on paper before changing anything with her hands. She counted every sack, nail, candle, horseshoe, and pound of dried meat, then matched them against Rafe's receipts. By the 4th evening, 3 facts were clear. Blackridge Trading Post had billed the station for goods never delivered. Pike's authorization number appeared beside every false charge, and the missing signal lantern had been invoiced twice. Rafe stood across the table while she arranged the papers.
How much?
$286 in 18 months. That would have replaced this stable roof and stocked salt through spring. His jaw tightened. I should have checked. You should check now. That is different from deserving to be robbed. Rafe looked at her. I am learning that distinction, she said. They settled into work without becoming prisoners of routine. He repaired the cistern gutter while she reorganized the freight shed. He asked before moving her ledgers. She asked before changing the pantry locks. At meals, they disagreed over coffee, oats, and repairs. No voices rose. No objects flew. The station did not punish either of them for being wrong. On the 13th day, Nora found the signal lantern beneath a torn tarpaulin in the loft. Its frame was bent, and one red panel cracked. They hid the damage and charged you for a replacement, she said. She loosened the retaining screw. The screwdriver slipped. The lantern fell. Red glass burst across the floor. Nora dropped before thought could stop her, arms covering her head. I'm sorry. I'll repay it, please. Rafe stopped near the stove. Nora. She could not look up. It is glass. Stay still until I clear it. The broom moved softly. When the last shard struck the bucket, Rafe crouched several feet away. Are you cut? No. May I come closer? She nodded. He sat on the floor without touching her. The frame can be repaired. I destroyed proof. We have the invoice and maker's mark. I should have been careful. Yes. She stared at him. Care matters, he said. Hurting you would not restore the glass or steady your hands. A broken laugh escaped her, followed by tears. I hate that she is still here. Nora touched her temple. She may be there a long time. What if I never become normal? Then we stop measuring you against people who were never forced to survive her. Together they repaired the lantern with clear chimney glass painted red as a temporary signal. That night, Nora made 3 copies of the evidence. One went inside the station ledger, one beneath a stable plank, and one into an envelope for the territorial marshal. When the Southern Trail opened enough for a mail rider, she stitched the packet inside a flour sack and added 2 false pounds to the manifest. Rafe examined the entry. Your first dishonest figure. My first useful one. The rider carried it north. A week later, meltwater moved beneath the creek ice. Freight traffic would soon return. So would anyone who understood what Nora's letter could destroy. Rafe found her studying a blank partnership form. "We can leave by the West Trail," he said.
"No. They will bring men."
"Then we need witnesses."
"I can keep you alive without them."
"That is not the same as giving me my life back."
His jaw set. "If Pike draws, I may kill him."
"Only if you must."
"You ask as though restraint is simple."
"No, I ask because it is not."
He turned toward the stove. "My brother begged me to turn back the night he died. I chose the route. The slide caught him below me."
"You have spent 9 years believing control could make the past obey."
Rafe faced her. Nora stopped close but did not touch him. "You cannot choose whether Hester comes or whether I testify. You can choose what kind of man stands beside me."
"What kind do you need?"
"One who lets me speak first."
"I can do that."
"And when I tell you to open the cistern gate, do it quickly." She showed him the gutter plan. By noon the next day, meltwater filled the raised cistern and a wooden sluice ran toward the freight shed. 3 mornings later, Hester rode into the yard with Pike and 2 armed men. Behind them came Delia, Eli, and a lean stranger wearing a deputy marshal's badge. Hester saw the badge and paled. Pike reached for his revolver. Deputy Marshal Owen Kerr drew first. "Hands where I can see them." Hester pointed at Nora.
"That woman stole my money and forged private accounts."
Nora stood on the station steps. Rafe remained 1 pace behind her. Kerr looked up. "Nora Whitcomb?"
"Yes."
"I received your packet." Nora raised her father's page.
"His records show false freight receipts tied to Amos Pike. Copper Ridge has matching numbers. Hester altered the store ledgers and accused me before I could compare them." "She is unstable," Hester said.
Delia dismounted.
"No, she is not. I treated the injuries Hester gave her and remained silent."
Eli climbs down carrying a blue metal box.
"The deed box,"
Nora said. "Found beneath Pike's office floor," Kerr replied.
"The partnership articles are inside."
Pike knocked Kerr's weapon aside, drew and fired toward the steps. Rafe pulled Nora behind the stone trough as the bullet struck the railing. Kerr returned fire. One of Pike's men surrendered. The other fled behind the stable. Hester seized the box from Eli and ran into the freight shed. Smoke curled beneath the door.
"She has the evidence,"
Nora said. Rafe started forward. Nora caught his sleeve. Pike had circled behind the stable with his revolver raised. Pike fired. The bullet tore through Rafe's coat near his injured shoulder. Rafe crossed the distance before Pike could fire again. They struck the snow. Pike clawed for the gun. Rafe drove his wrist against the ground until it fell free, then closed a hand around his throat.
"Rafe!"
He looked at Nora. "Let Kerr take in." For 1 second, 9 years of grief demanded payment. Then Rafe released Pike and rolled him onto his face. Kerr locked irons around the sheriff's wrists. The shed windows burst outward. Nora ran to the cistern lever. "Open the gate!" Rafe obeyed. Water thundered through the sluice and struck the shed wall. Steam rose. The lower flames collapsed, but fire still climbed the supports. Hester stumbled out, clutching the deed box, her skirt burning at the hem. Nora threw a blanket around her and forced her into the snow. Hester fought free.
"You ruin everything."
Nora took the box.
"No, I record what you ruined."
A beam fell inside. Rafe and Eli dragged out the station ledger while Kerr's men formed a bucket line. Soon the fire sank into black water and smoking timber. No one died. By afternoon, Kerr had compared the partnership articles, Pike's receipts, Nora's copies, and the surviving station records. He arrested Hester for fraud, assault, conspiracy, and destroying evidence. Pike faced those charges and attempted murder. Before Hester entered the wagon, she looked at Nora.
I fed you. You used food as a chain. I gave you a home. You gave me walls. Hester waited for hatred. Nora felt only distance. You do not decide what I owe anymore. Kerr took her away. Spring reached Copper Ridge slowly. The court restored Nora's half-interest in Blackridge Trading Post and ordered the stolen money repaid from Hester's property. Pike lost his badge before trial. Delia testified, followed by the townspeople who had once studied the floor while Nora bled. Nora sold her share to the store's workers on one condition. Part of the profit would maintain 2 locked rooms upstairs for women who needed time to choose what came next. Delia agreed to oversee them. Eli joined Samuel Reed's freight crew and wrote each month. At Copper Ridge, Nora ordered proper red glass, rebuilt the accounts, cut supply costs, and earned enough to repair the stable roof before autumn. When the first northbound coach arrived, Rafe placed 3 documents on the table.
A partnership contract, a bank draft for Nora's wages and investment share, and a ticket south.
The pass is open, he said. I noticed. You can go anywhere. And if I stay? You own half the station. Your room remains yours, so do your keys, wages, and choices. Nora read the contract twice. You left out one thing.
What?
What you want. That is not a contract term.
No, it is a question.
Rafe looked toward the open door. I want you here, but wanting is not a claim.
Nora folded the ticket and placed it in his shirt pocket.
I am not staying because you helped me leave Blackridge.
I know.
I am not staying because I owe you.
I know.
I am staying because this station carries my work. Because I sleep without listening for footsteps outside my door. Because disagreement does not end the world.
His breath changed.
And because I love you.
Rafe did not reach for her. He waited. Nora took his shirt in both hands, rose onto her toes, and kissed him. For a moment he remained still. Then his hands settled carefully at her waist, and she leaned closer because she chose to. Outside, the repaired signal lantern burned red against the mountain morning, guiding travelers toward a place where the door could open from either side.